What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we are continuing our 2022 schedule previews and projected records here with the Michigan Wolverines. Of course, a big surprise team last season, making it to the college football playoff. Before we get into the projected record, let's take a look at the schedule. And before we get to the 2022 schedule, let's look back at 2021. The 2021 schedule for Michigan wound up working out pretty well. They got Ohio State at home. That made a difference. You had Washington in the non-conference. Thought that was going to be a tough game, but it wound up being an easy win for the Wolverines. Wisconsin and Nebraska, Penn State, Maryland, all road games that we thought would potentially trip up this Michigan team, but they took care of business in all of those games. That Wisconsin win, looking back at it, a really impressive win, and that's when we knew that this Michigan team was a little bit different, and they went on to, of course, win the Big Ten championship, go to the college football playoff. Just a great season for Michigan. But now let's turn the page to 2022, see if this schedule is going to be kind to the Wolverines. Here is the schedule. Before we break down each game, let's take a look at who they play outside of the division, because of course we know Michigan will play every team in the Big Ten East. So in the non-conference, they'll play Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. You can't ask for a much easier non-conference schedule than that. I mean, those should all three be easy wins for Michigan. They do not have a marquee matchup in the non-conference this year, which is, it depends on how you look at it. It's good for the schedule being easier. You'd like to maybe have a big non-conference matchup to show you what you can do, but still, the Big Ten's a pretty tough conference, and you look at who they play in the Big Ten West. They'll play Iowa on the road. That might be the toughest potential matchup that you could have out of the Big Ten West, as a road game at Iowa. We don't know if Iowa's going to be on top of the West this year, but we know it's a tough place to play, and they should be right there near the top if they're not at the top. So that is a very tough draw there. They get Nebraska at home. That's another game that could be pretty tough. Nebraska, we know how many close games they lost last season. You figure that this team will be pretty good this year, maybe in contention to the Big Ten West, but the good news is Michigan gets them at home. They'll play Illinois at home as well. So not a too tough of a draw out of the West, but it's about average, I guess. Iowa, one of the top teams. Nebraska, probably middle of the road. Illinois towards the bottom. So you get one of each if you're Michigan. So let's go back to the schedule, see how it plays out. They will open up on September 3rd against Colorado State. Then on September 10th, they'll play Hawaii. September 17th, they will play UConn. So they'll play their three non-conference games, first 3 weeks, all at home. If you're trying to break in some new players, especially on that defensive side, this is how you want to do it. You want to have some easy games there at the start. Don't even have to go on the road. So a very, very easy month of September. They will play Maryland on September 24th. It is a home game. Maryland figures to have a pretty good offense this year, so that could potentially be a challenge. Could be a shootout when you look at these two teams. But Michigan should be the better team, and they're playing at home. So you look at them in the month of September, there's no reason why this team should not be 4-0 at the end of September. Very easy start. But then it gets a little bit tougher. Take a look at the month of October. They will play Iowa on the road on October the 1st. Again, that's going to be a very tough game. Outside of Ohio State, that might be their toughest game this year just because it's on the road. I'm not saying Iowa will be the second best team that they play. They might be, but playing them on the road, that is going to be a very, very tough matchup. That's going to be tough. Then you've got Indiana after that on October the 8th. We know Indiana was a disaster last season. I expect them to be better this year. They've been working that transfer portal. The game is on the road, but still Michigan should clearly be the better team. That's one of those trap games in between Iowa on the road and then Penn State. If you don't bring your A game, that one could be tricky, but you have to like Michigan's chances on the road in that one. Penn State after that on October the 15th. This will be a home game for Michigan. Then they get a bye week after Penn State before Michigan State. So a really good spot for a bye week. You have this tough stretch with Iowa and Indiana on the road and Penn State at home. Then you get the bye week to prepare for Michigan State. That is a very good spot, in my opinion, for a bye week. So they'll have 2 weeks to get ready for Michigan State. Then they'll play a Rutgers team, a Rutgers program that seems to be starting to turn the corner a little bit. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near the top of the Big Ten or anything like that. They will play them on the road, though. That'll be November 5th. Then you have the game against Nebraska on November 12th. Illinois after that on November 19th. And then the big one at the end on November 26th. They will go on the road to face Ohio State. So I think the schedule sets up pretty well for Michigan. Again, an easy start in the month of September. Interesting that you play Nebraska and Illinois there in the final two games before Ohio State. Two games that are not even in the division. But that month of October is probably going to make or break Michigan. On the road at Iowa, and then especially Penn State and Michigan State. Indiana maybe could be a competitive game. We'll have to wait and see how good the Hoosiers are. But with Iowa, Penn State, and Michigan State, if Michigan were to lose a couple of those games, it's going to really change the season, and it's going to make that Ohio State game not as meaningful. But if they can get through that stretch by winning, obviously all three would be great. But if you win 2 out of the 3 with Iowa, Penn State, and Michigan State, you win 2 of those games, and let's say they lose to Iowa. That would be, best case scenario. Either way, though, with 1 loss, if they go into that Ohio State game with 1 loss, then we know more than likely they are going to be playing for a spot in the Big Ten championship. So a schedule that is pretty easy, to be honest, for a Big Ten team. No hard non-conference games. The Big Ten West crossover isn't brutal. They get both Michigan State and Penn State at home. So this schedule sets up for Michigan to where, once again, they could be playing Ohio State at the end of the season for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Here are the projections from 2021, and you see everyone pretty much had Michigan 6, 7, 8 wins. No one really expected this team to make it to the college football playoff, to 11-1. Now, that was their record in the regular season last year, 11-1. Our projection had them at 7-5. So going through and doing what we're about to do here in just a second, that had them at 7-5. Our prediction was 6-6. I had this team really kind of falling off in the second half of the season. I thought Jim Harbaugh was going to get fired, and I was wrong, and I will admit it. I was wrong about this Michigan team. I think really looked way too much into 2020. Didn't realize how fluky that year was, and shouldn't have put so much stock into that. But, I mean, this team, looking at how they played in 2020, it was hard to imagine them doing what they did this past season. The FBI had them at 6.4 and 5.7, so they also had them around 6-6, same thing as my prediction, and that was actually lower than the projection. Vegas was a little higher on this team, had the over-under at 8, and obviously they went over. And I'll be honest with you, in the preseason, I would have thought that the under would have had a really good chance there, because I didn't see this team really doing much better than 8-4. I thought that was probably about their best case scenario, maybe 9-3. But they proved me wrong for sure, and we'll see if they can do it again this upcoming season. Of course, we're not giving away any predictions this early. This is simply a projection based off of the schedule, how tough the schedule is, and roughly how good we think each team is going to be this upcoming season. So here is the schedule again. Here's the key that we'll be using. You see the games that say in white, those will be your 50-50 games. If it's less than 20%, it'll be in red, 20 to 29% in orange, 30 to 39% in yellow, 61 to 70% in purple, 71 to 80% in blue, over 80% in green. And basically the way I like to look at this is, if it's in that 20 to 29 range or the 71-80 range, that means that I think a team is going to be favored or an underdog by about 10 points. And if we're talking a game that's in that 60 to 70 range, that's a game where I think that one team is going to be favored by about a touchdown. So the 50-50 games, those are the games where I think the spread would likely be 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 points, somewhere in that range or less. And the way we do it is we go, if it's over 80%, if it's in green, we count it as a win. Under 20%, count it as a loss. Then we average out the percentages for the other games and give you a projected record. So the easy wins for Michigan, they've got 7 of them. They've got 7 easy wins. That means the worst case, the absolute worst case scenario for Michigan, if this team just plays terrible for whatever reason, they're still going to go 7-5. They're going to beat Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn, and Maryland. Indiana, Rutgers on the road. Perhaps if there's a monumental upset, we could see something crazy happen in one of those games. But I think it's over 80% for Michigan, and same thing with Illinois. So you've got 7 wins that are almost guaranteed. I wouldn't say they're all guaranteed, but they will be big favorites. And these green games, we're talking about games where they're going to be favored by more than 2 touchdowns, and I think they will be in all 5 of these matchups. But let's go to the blue now, the 71 to 80% range. And it's kind of tough. It's tough to do this, especially this early, before we even know what the rosters are going to look like at the end of the day with all the transfers and all of that. But I think you can put Penn State and Nebraska here in the purple. I think these are games where Michigan is going to be favored, but not huge favorites. And Nebraska, I mean, I have a feeling that Nebraska is going to be pretty good this year. They lost a lot of close games last year. The game was close against Michigan last season. So that's a game that I think Michigan will be favored by about a touchdown. Same thing with Penn State. Playing Penn State at home, I think, is going to be huge for Michigan. Really, both of these games, having these games at home, the schedule really does set up well for this team. Iowa and Ohio State, the only real tough road games. So because the games are at home, I think you can put these games in that 61 to 70% range. If Nebraska turns out to not be as good as maybe we think, perhaps that game should be in the blue, 71 to 80%. But given the way they had so many close games last year and what they have coming back, I think we can put that game in that purple category. And then you got the games where Michigan's going to be an underdog. I think there's only one. That's Ohio State. I know Michigan beat Ohio State last season, but with everything Ohio State has coming back and the losses for Michigan on defense, Ohio State is being looked at as a team that's preseason going to be ranked ahead of Michigan, plus the game is on the road. Now, if this game was at Michigan, I'd probably put it in that 50-50 range, but because it's on the road, revenge factor for Ohio State, the losses on defense for Michigan, I think you can put this in the 30 to 39% range. It's close. It's close. I mean, I don't think that I think it's closer to 39% for Michigan than it is for 30%, but I still think they're going to be a 6 or 7 point underdog in this game, and so that does land it here in the yellow. And then you've got Iowa and Michigan State. These games stay in the white. These are the 50-50 games for Michigan. Iowa's a very tough place to play. Michigan, I think, should be the better team, but because of the fact that it's on the road, that bumps this one into that 50-50 range. And Michigan State, the game is at home for Michigan, but it's a rivalry game. Michigan State just beat them last year. I think Michigan's the better team. Same thing with Iowa, but just with all those factors, I think you have to put this game as a 50-50 game. And I believe when you do the percentages, if I bump this game up into the purple, the 61 to 70%, the projected record still comes out the same. The projection for Michigan is 10-2, so a much better projection this season. Remember, 7-5 was the projection last year. They obviously beat that. Can they beat a 10-2 projection? Well, it's possible. Now, I'm not saying that this team can't do better than 10-2 this year, but given the schedule and given how good we think each team is going to be, when you average everything out, the projection for Michigan football in 2022 does come out to 10-2. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Do you think better or worse? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.